Hello, everyone. So, today, what I want to talk to you about is I want to explain to you something that is very dear to my heart when it comes to the passion. A lot of pastors, preachers, priests, those that give sermons, tend to refer to Jesus having fear. Jesus had fear at Gethsemane where he prayed, he sweated blood. He had fear. To me, this is untrue. I don't believe there was any fear in Jesus. Yes, he was God, and yes, he was fully man. And he went through things that we go through. But fear is never referenced in any of the scriptures when you read them. When you look into the scriptures, first of all, we're going to see that the words that Jesus uses in reference to his death, because he speaks to the disciples and tells them about his death frequently. In each of the books there, we have, Matthew, we have John, and we have Mark, who are eyewitnesses to Jesus talking to them about his death, and which is written down in the Gospels. Scriptures using the words sorrowful, grief, anguish. So when we get to those, sorrowful is a sad feeling when it makes grief or loss. Okay? Anguish, extreme pain, or severe mental or physical torture. Word overwhelmed. Right? So the emotion we have is too intense. We're overwhelmed by it. And then you have agony. Agony is extreme physical or mental suffering. It can be put as the final stage of a difficult or painful death. None of these definitions have fear in it. Now, when you look into the scriptures, see that in each of these scriptures, Jesus speaks about his death. 3 times in Mark. Let's start with Mark. Mark 8:31 through 32. What he references is the Son of Man will suffer many things. He will be handed over, he will be killed, and after 3 days he will rise. He predicts in Mark 9:30-32, the Son of Man is going to be delivered, they will kill him, and after 3 days he will rise. In Mark 10:32-34, Jesus predicts his death a 3rd time. So we get 3 times. The same happens in Matthew, the same happens in John. Each referencing the pain he's going to have, the suffering he's going to have, the death he's going to have, and the resurrection he's going to have. In all of those, he uses the definitions of the words we spoke. He uses the words that we looked through earlier: anguish, agony, overwhelming, sorrowful. But none of those are fear. We have to look at what Jesus was asking for. He wasn't asking, Father, take away this death. I don't want to die, but your will be done. That's not what he said. He said, if possible, can you take this cup away from me? Not my will, but your will be done. So what is this cup? If we go to the Old Testament, and we look at what cup means through the Old Testament, it is clearly stated as being used for God's wrath. The cup of wrath was going to be poured out. Psalm 22:1. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from helping me? My God, why have you forsaken me? See, as we go into the New Testament, we go into other scriptures that tell us he gave his life willingly. In 1 John 3:16, we have, by this we know love, because he laid down his life for us. Laid it down. Didn't fear to go into it. He laid it down for us. In the book of John, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays his life down for his sheep. There's no fear in those statements. He laid it down. He gave it willingly. So we know that in all of this, throughout everything that he predicted, everything he said, he never once showed any fear when saying it to his disciples. Hey, look, I am going into Jerusalem and I'm going to be handed over. I'm going to be punished. There was anguish upon him, but not fear. The state of knowing that he was going to leave his disciples, there was sadness. There was an ache in the heart, but there was no fear. He knew the plan from the beginning of the world. He was going to come, lay his life down, take upon all the sin. And even when he was on that cross, he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. There is no fear in that statement. We have an account of the robber next to him who says, remember me. And Jesus said, today you will be with me in paradise. There is no fear in that statement. But what was it that Jesus was asking for? Jesus was asking for God's wrath to be taken away, if possible. See, because at a moment of time, all the sins of the world were going to be upon him. And at that moment, the Father was not going to be able to look upon him. He was going to turn his back on him and separate himself from him. Jesus did not want the separation of the love of the Father. What Jesus was saying is, at that moment in time, Father, if you could just not take out that wrath on me, if you could not leave me alone, if you could stay with me during that time that I have taken on all the sins of the world, I would love it. I would appreciate it. But not my will be done. Yours. All he was asking for was for God not to take his love away from him at any moment. Through all the punishment, as you read the Passion, as we call it, you read the whipping, and for those of you that want to know how badly that was, look at what the Romans did. Look up your history and see how brutal the Romans would beat a person ready to be crucified. And then you can look at the Passion of the Christ, and when you see what happened in the Passion of the Christ to Jesus in his punishment, that was nothing compared to what they really did to him. He knew he was going to go through all that. That's what he came for. He said he gave his life willingly. Paul writes it in his letters. He gave his life willingly for us to have reconciliation with the Lord and eternal life when he rose again. Jesus was not scared in the Garden of Gethsemane. He willingly gave his life. There was no fear. Yes, there was anguish. He was overwhelmed. There was a lot of emotion going on. There was no fear in him. He knew what he came for. He knew what he had to do. What he asked for was, Dad, at that moment in time, don't leave me, but your will be done. That is what Jesus was asking for. There was never no fear in him. And I hope that you can look up the scriptures. I hope you can look into history, the punishment he took. I hope you can go and you can see these translations and understand the days that when you one day give a sermon, if that is what you're called to, and you gave a sermon on the passion, you gave a sermon on the crucifixion, you gave a sermon on what Jesus went through and what he was going through in his prayers, that you don't make the mistake of adding fear to that list of emotions. He knew what he came for. He knew it from the beginning. He was there in the beginning because he is God. And he knew the plan. And he knew what he had to do. He did that willingly. All he asked for was, God, don't leave me alone. But your will be done. That is what I want you guys to understand. It says that he gave his life willingly. And I hope that you can see that there was no